Welcome to day 10 in the 12 Days of Christmas Cards series. This is Elena with Black Sheep 303 Creative, and today's project I am calling a modern treescape because it uses some very contemporary looking tree stamps and some unusual colors to create an interesting holiday card. So to start off with, I am using an A2 sized white cardstock front, and I'm going to be stamping that with the My Favorite Things Snowfall stamp set. Now my plan is to emboss the entire panel, so I want to get a really good ink coverage. So I'm using my MISTI and have lined up the white cardstock on that grid paper on the right, and now I'm going to double stamp it again and stamp it again with the Versamark ink. And the MISTI allows you to do that, so if the paper had shifted in between stamps, I could have lined it up again, knowing against the grid paper, knowing the location of where I had lined it up the first time. Now I am embossing this panel with two colors of embossing powder. I'm using gold and silver. I've just sort of tossed the gold on in sort of random places and then flipped it over as quickly as possible. And now I'm just using the silver embossing on the rest of the panel to complete the embossing powder over the entire pattern. And I'm just going to take my little paintbrush here and sweep off any areas that got embossing powder where it shouldn't be. There wasn't too much of that, and this is a fairly random stamp, so it wasn't too important that I get it perfect. And now I'm just heating it with my heat gun to get a really nice gold and silver shiny finish. I did use gold and silver for sort of a holiday metallic-y feel. I knew I was going for non-traditional colors, and this gold and silver always works with everything, right? So for my contemporary snowbank, I have cut a piece of cardstock. It's about 1.25 inches wide. And I'm using some 3/8 inch Be Creative tape, and I'm adhering that down to the top edge of that white cardstock and burnishing it down. And then I'm pulling off the second layer of adhesive cover and I'm coating it with some extra fine snow glitter. So I'm burnished that down, and then I'm taking my Swiffer cloth and just cleaning up my workspace as well as my hands and that piece of paper to get any excess glitter off. Now for my trees, I am using the Papertrey ink Treetops Glisten stamp set. It has a bunch of really fun, interesting trees, as well as the greeting that I'm going to use, which is Where the Treetops Glisten. I will be using 6 colors of ink, all in shades of sort of blues and purples, in order to work with my color theme. This first color is Memento Nautical Blue, and I will be stamping a solid tree as well as a more decorative tree. It's sort of a tiered line tree. These stamps are fun because you can stamp them by themselves. They can also be layered one on top of each other. So like say this one is stamped here with Teal Zeal, could have been layered on top of that solid tree up above it if I had done it in say like a lighter color. And then this is Elderberry, and I'm using, again, stamping a decorative tree and a solid tree, but I kind of liked using them all on their own, so I did not layer them. And then this is Lawn Fawn's Deep Sea ink, which is a super dark navy blue, and I use that for just that little tree, and then I will use that for the greeting. And then this is Ranger Dye Ink's Caribbean Coast for a solid tree, and then this is Blue Ribbon that I'll be using for a tiered tree. And then at the very last minute, I decide I might need one more tree, so I stamp one more solid tree with the Teal Zeal again. As I mentioned, there are some layering stamps, so they have some decorative stamps too. So this is a little, some sort of dots or ornament that you can layer over the trees. So I'm using some silver pigment ink to stamp that onto 2 of the solid trees. And then there is sort of a crisscrossy, very straight-lined garland that I stamp onto the purple solid tree to give it a little bit of extra decoration. My plan is to cut these out. I do have the dies for this set. However, I have some problems with the dies, so I don't use them, especially for the trees, especially for like a simple shape like this. But first, I need to add some little dots to my tiered tree. Since there isn't a stamp for that, I am using my gold permanent chalk markers to do that. And then I'm going to take my silver permanent chalk marker and just touch up anywhere that the silver pigment ink didn't quite do its job. And then I'm going to take my white Signo gel pen and go over the lines in that decorative purple tree, because the garland lines on that did not stamp overly clearly, so I am just going to clean that up with the white pen. Now, here's a die that I used for the greeting because the greeting is fairly complicated and I didn't think I could cut it out. However, the dies for this set are solid, and I don't do so well with solid dies, especially lining them up over stamped images that I've already stamped. So what I wind up doing is cutting the die out first and then stamping on top of it, like I'm doing right now, to try to get the best alignment that I can. Now, it doesn't work perfectly, as this did not. However, close enough as far as I'm concerned. And that's kind of a problem for me with the dies for this set. Like, I don't work real well with solid dies. I need kind of more like an outline to get the cutting area lined up correctly with the stamped image, more like Lawn Fawn has, if that makes sense. If you have any tips for working with solid dies, I would love to hear it because I would love to be able to get a little more use out of the dies for this set. Now I'm using a glue pen to stick down my trees. I specifically used a glue pen because I knew some of the trees would overlap the glitter and the cardstock, and I wanted something that I knew would stick to both surfaces, especially since that glitter is a little bit tricky to get things to stick to. And I had tried and line these up beforehand, so you didn't have to watch me spending an hour trying to figure out where everything would go. I spared you that. And now I'm just putting down a piece of navy cardstock, and then I'm cutting a ribbon end on my turquoise cardstock, and I'm going to layer that on top of the blue cardstock. And then, of course, for a little extra dimension, I have to add some foam dots to the back of my grating. And I do cut one down to kind of get it to fit more correctly. And then I'm going to layer that on top of those stripes near the top. And I will clip off all the little overhanging bits, and then I will be adhering the entire panel down to the front of an A2 side folding card base. I was too afraid to emboss directly onto the card base itself, so I did do a separate panel. Although if you were braver than I am, you could easily emboss right on the front of that card panel and build it right there. Now, I didn't like the proportions on the front of the card, so I did trim off about 1/4 of an inch off the bottom of the front, and now I'm adding more of that glittered tape to the inside of the card so that you get a little bit of the glitter being brought to the inside, and it also shows through on the front as well. And that is the completed project. So if you like very contemporary and unusual color combinations for your holiday cards, this could be a good option for you. I purposely did more of the blues and the purples so that it could be used potentially as a winter card or possibly a Hanukkah card. So thank you so much for watching. There are only 2 days left in the 12 Days of Christmas Cards series. If you have missed any of the previous videos, they are linked in the description below. There is also a link to a complete supply list for this project as well. As always, thank you so much for watching. Happy holidays!